namaskar, good morning to all of you, and to all colleagues who have joined us online from different parts of the country. It's my pleasure to welcome and be part of this very important conversation that we will be taking forward over the next 1.5 days. The Plan for Every Child Conference 2021. The theme is Build Back Better with Girls. I think all of us are experiencing that we are living through a pandemic. There are certain constraints with which each one of us will have to kind of deal with. So the first request that I'll have for all of us is that we should take out our masks only when we are speaking. Our speakers for the inaugural session already with us, and I'll handing over the mic to Ms. Rati Vinay Jha. She's the president of the Plan India Governing Board and the former secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. Rati ji has been an ardent champion of girls' rights, child rights. She has been working relentlessly with us at Plan and with several other civil society organizations. The Plan for Every Child conference, which started in 2016, she's been a very strong inspiration for us. And with these words, I'll request Ratiji if she is joining us online. So Ratiji, if you could kindly extend share the welcome address for the conference, and after that we will continue with the rest of the session agendas. Ratiji, over to you.
Thank you, Asif. Thank you very much, and good morning to all those that are present for this conference, not just in the hall at Park Hotel, but also whoever's attending from all over India and all over the world. Thank you very much for being part of this conference. Plan India, we are very happy to host the Plan for Every Child Conference 2021. In spite of difficult circumstances, it's been possible to do this, and that's what I'm thankful for. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you, our guests, the participants attending from all over the globe. And because of these circumstances, as I mentioned, we are conducting this conference in the hybrid mode. Plan India, as most of you know, is a nationally registered not-for-profit organization which has been striving to advance children's rights and equality for girls for a little more than 4 decades in India. And we aim to create a lasting impact in the lives of vulnerable and excluded children, especially girls and the communities that they live in. It's not an easy task. It's a wish and a hope, and we act on that. And I think there's a lot more to be done, not just by us, by the government, by civil society, and a lot of others. The Plan for Every Child National Conference focuses on reaching out to every child in difficult circumstances and supporting girls and young women in building their capabilities and their leadership to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This conference has been organized, as mentioned by Asif before me, since 2016. And we aim by this conference to provide a unique platform to bring together experts from all over the world to deliberate on issues and solutions to complex issues related to protection, health, education, participation, violence against girls, early childhood care, and sexual and reproductive health. The first national conference was held in 2016, and it was on the theme of children in difficult circumstances. This was followed the next year by edition, which was titled Leave No Girl Behind. And the 2018 conference was titled Girls Get Equal. Due to the pandemic and other circumstances, we were not able to hold the annual conference in 2019 and 2020. The theme for the fourth national conference is Build Back Better with Girls. This is in the context of managing lives in COVID-19 times. As an organization working for inclusion, safety and equality for girls, Plan India is committed to ensure that projects being implemented on COVID-19 communities and areas take into consideration and respond to the pandemic's impact on girls and young women. In this context, the conference will address sectors and issues where the impact of COVID-19 has affected women and girls most. We hope to outline priority measures to accompany both the immediate response and long-term recovery efforts also. To achieve this, the thematic sessions we want to deliberate on during this conference will focus on four main areas. The first is towards inclusive and quality education. Second is to advance gender equality in food security and nutrition. The third is ensuring mental health and well-being. And the last one is towards eliminating gender-based violence in all its forms. Of course, the main focus in all these four areas will be the girl as well as women. Plan India would like to follow up on the recommendations and action points from the deliberations of the conference to ensure that there is a meaningful impact on the rights of girls and women. We at Plan India are looking forward to an enriching discussion, sharing of experiences and learnings over the next 2 days to help build back better and to rebuild a more inclusive and equal world where concern and care will be centered on the lives and future of the girls. I'd once again like to thank all of you, our guests, our speakers, panelists, and participants for joining hands with Plan India in this initiative. It's an initiative which will take years to fulfill in many ways, particularly for a country like India. Let us hope and strive to build back a better society for girls and young women in these difficult times. I wish the conference all success, and I wish each one of you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratiji, for the inspiring words and for extending the warm welcome to all the chairs, speakers, eminent guests, and the delegates to the conference who have joined from different parts of the country and globally. Just to add on the points, Ratiji, as you mentioned, let me also take the opportunity to share on my behalf and on behalf of all my colleagues at Plan India, a very warm welcome to each of my eminent panelists at the session now, and for all the other sessions, the panelists, the chairs. We are really indebted that you have taken time out of your extremely busy schedules to share your experiences, your perspectives, your advice to hundreds of people who are working day in, day out at the grassroots, at the front line, trying to make a difference to the lives of girls, young women, children, especially in COVID times. So we are very thankful for your time, and we take this opportunity to extend a very warm, heartfelt welcome and gratitude for being part of this conversation. And with these words, let me just share a brief AV, which is about Plan India, just to draw our focus on And many of you, while you are aware, but you may still want to know what is Plan India and been doing. So the AV, please. Can you please? Thank you. So this was in brief about Plan India. We also have an audio visual on the Plan for Every Child conference. May I request if we can play the audio visual, please?
This conference is a first ever effort on the national level to focus our attention on the very serious issue of children in difficult circumstances.
Thank you. So, coming to the conference for 2021 and the focus on Build Back Better with Girls. But as has been our practice at all our previous Plan for Every Child conference, we present a report card on the recommendations of the previous conference. So the last conference that happened on 5th to 7th December 2018, at that conference, it ended with a set of 20 recommendations that were directed to policymakers, to civil society organizations, to people in the media, judiciary. So those were the recommendations that had come from children, from youth, and from the eminent panelists at the 2018 conference. Very happy to report that now there has been progress. We did our report card on the progress that has happened over the last 2 years on the recommendations of the conference. After the conference, the recommendations were compiled, and the Plan India team had ensured that the recommendations reach each of the duty bearers who are responsible for implementing or working on the recommendations coming from the conference. So it was shared with people within the government system, people with civil society, UN organizations. No, I'll not take much time going through the details of each of the recommendations because they're quite detailed in scope. Obviously, we will incorporate the action taken on the recommendations as part of the publication from this conference. But there were a few very important recommendations that had emerged from the 2018 conference with where the focus was on girls get equal. One of the first recommendations was to ensure that more evidence-based programming is undertaken, and very happy to report that when we did our analysis of the review of the context, we found that over the last 2-3 years, there has been a number of very important studies that have been conducted by the UN system, by government, Niti Aayog, and those studies and their recommendations are being used to further refine, to sharpen our projects, programs for the welfare, for the development of girls and young women. So that is one action that has started taking shape. Also, one of the actions that was recommendations was to have a comprehensive, multi-pronged, multi-sectoral approaches at the grassroots levels are required, emphasizing convergence. So again, when we did our analysis, especially in the project areas where Plan is working, and also we interacted with a large number of other civil society organizations, we did interviews with government officials at the state, at the district, at the national level as part of how they see the progress towards the recommendation of driving greater convergence. And again, there has been significant progress even with the limitations of COVID that happened over the last 18 months. Progress has been seen on various fronts. Monitoring frameworks has been an important recommendation that emerged from the previous conference. Again, very happy to share that very robust monitoring frameworks have been developed by NGOs, by government, by various ministries to track and to build evidence around and to actually measure, has the needle moved, especially on important development indicators related to girls' rights and gender transformative development. So overall, no, when we did our review, we found that there has been progress that we have seen on each of the 20 recommendations that had come, and therefore it's important that we felt that it's important to report back on that. Yeah, things have moved no, from the recommendations that had come on the conference. There are more efforts that are underway, and no, at Plan India and all our partners and no, our collaboration with government agencies at the district, at the state, at the national level. No, we are trying to see how all the recommendations that are proposed from the 2018 start getting actioned and implemented for the welfare and benefit. And those actions were all to ensure that girls get equal. And in fact, one of the most important initiative that is very important for me to share is the whole effort around Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which had a strong pivot on the SDG 5 to see how, as a country, we are all working towards achieving the goal of Beti Bachao, and in that process, progressing towards achieving the objects and the purpose of SDG 5, which is about advancing gender equality. So now, with these words, we'll move on to yet another audio visual, which is there. As part of this conference, what we had done, our colleagues, was to reach out to large number of girls from different parts of our country. And we said that when you hear the word build back better with girls, what is that one word that comes to your mind? And that has been very well captured in this audio visual, which I would just request my colleagues in the tech team to play it out, please.
Protective environment, equal opportunity, my education, world without violence, safe travel, playground, health, safety, unity, sanitation, green environment, freedom, job, awareness, guidance, women empowerment, sports, girls' aspirations.
Thank you. And this was very interesting, the exercise that we did, and so many different perspectives, aspects of Girls Get Equal emerged from listening to the girls themselves. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, and I have the honor and privilege to invite Shri Ram Haridas. He is the representative of United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, for India and country director for Bhutan. Shri Ram Haridas, a national of Sri Lanka, brings with him over 18 years experience in strategic planning and programming in both development and humanitarian contexts. Prior to joining UNFPA India, he served in UNFPA Sierra Leone, where in addition to overseeing the implementation of large-scale donor-funded projects, he also coordinated UNFPA's response to the Ebola crisis. Before that, Mr. Haridas spent nearly 9 years with UNHCR in Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. Mr. Haridas holds a master's degree in law and human rights from the University of London and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Curtin University of Technology, Perth. He is passionate about the rights and choices of women and girls and a strong believer in amplifying the voice of youth and adolescents. So with this introduction, may I request Shri Ram Haridas, he will be enlightening us. He will be sharing his experiences and work that has been happening in UNFPA and within the larger UN system on gender lens for promoting equality in the context of COVID-19. Over to you, Sriram. You can speak from there, whichever is more convenient.
Thanks, Asif. I think it's a tough fact to follow, especially after that AV, because the girls have said it all. Dear friends and colleagues, good morning to you all. I'm very pleased to be here and speak at the 4th National Conference on Plan for Every Child, an initiative by Plan India that aims to promote children's rights and equality for girls. This is, of course, an issue closest to my heart. We at UNFPA India are extremely proud of our association with Plan India for the advancement of sexual reproductive health and rights of young people and girls with a focus on marginalized population. Plan India's work is well known. We just saw that AV. Your achievements have been stellar. The Help India Heal initiative, through which COVID-affected families were supported during the second wave, especially girls and young women with vaccination and food security interventions, was really admirable. When Charles Dickens spoke, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. In the opening lines of his book, A Tale of Two Cities, it seems he was talking about the last 2 years. I cannot imagine how hard this period has been for our children, and especially girls from the marginalized sections, who are probably being hit the hardest. Therefore, the topic I have been given today, COVID-19, a gender lens for promoting equality, is so pertinent as we mark almost 2 years since the onset of the pandemic. We all know about the massive toll that COVID has had on people's health and lives. We all have lived through it. While the health impact on the pandemic has dominated our collective mind space and response efforts, we must not lose sight of its long-term socio-economic implications that have had a clear gender impact. Not everyone is on the same boat. Disease outbreaks affect women and men differently, and pandemics make existing inequalities for women and girls and discrimination of other marginalized groups, such as persons with disabilities and those in extreme poverty, even worse. In fact, the number of people living in poverty in India is estimated to have increased by 75 million due to COVID-19, with actually more women estimated to be pushed into extreme poverty, especially in rural areas. In fact, rural women's employment accounted for nearly 80% of job losses between March and April 2021. You take, for example, the provision of family planning services and other sexual reproductive health information services or commodities, including those related to menstrual hygiene products, which are central to women's and girls' health, empowerment, and dignity. We all saw them being severely impacted as supply chains underwent strains from COVID-19. Therefore, there is no recovery without applying a gender lens. And at UNFPA and even at the UN, we are strongly guided by the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said, countries need to put women and girls at the center of efforts to recover from COVID-19. We will not recover from COVID-19 unless we put them at the center of our efforts. Around the world, including in India, women make up more than 70% of health and social service workers, midwives, nurses, you take the ASHAs here, the community health workers. They are on the front lines on efforts to combat and contain COVID. In many of our own UNFPA funded projects, we have seen young girls whose work has shown through the pandemic. If you take the story of a 19-year-old Chanchal, a peer educator under the UNFPA REC Samriddhi project in Chhatarpur district in Madhya Pradesh. She delivered sanitary napkins to girls across her village just to ensure that there's no discontinuity of using menstrual health products during the COVID pandemic. We have young girls who have stopped child marriage in Rajasthan We have young girls who have sensitized tribal populations in Odisha. And we have young girls who went around slums in Patna and sensitized the slum population about COVID-appropriate behaviors. And in the AV that was shown by Plan India, we again saw how young people, and especially girls, are at the forefront in COVID response as well. And there are thousands of other girls in the country who have shown us what the girl power can do during the pandemic. However, the sad irony is that when resources are strained and institutional capacity is limited, it is girls and women who face disproportionate and detrimental impact. That is only further worsened in context of fragility, conflict, and emergencies like COVID. Adolescent girls are especially vulnerable as they continue to face a range of challenges, including increased risk of violence, early and forced marriage, unintended pregnancies, anemia, and disproportionate care work. As we speak, it's not difficult to think, or it's not unimaginable, that a young girl is being married to a much older woman somewhere in India. That is unfortunately the reality here. There are indications that many of these issues have actually got worse with the pandemic. Keeping girls in schools has been recognized as an essential pathway to not just tackle early marriages, but as a space to receive crucial information on sexual reproductive health, menstrual hygiene management, and receive iron and folic acid supplements as well. School closures, coupled with the economic burden and uncertainty for poor and vulnerable households, actually run the risk of reversing decades of improvements. All of you would have seen the latest NFHS 5 figures. I mean, there are a lot for all of us to cheer, but there are also many areas which really need improvement as well. Child marriage, for example, has only declined really marginally. I'm just looking at the figures from 27 to 23.3. There have also not been significant changes in the prevalence of gender-based violence. 1/3 of women aged 18 to 49 still continue to face violence from their spouse. The percentage of anemic teenage girls has actually got worsened between the last two NFHS results. But this is not all gloom and doom, and that's the message I also want to give. In spite of the many challenges girls actually face, we have seen that they have strong academic aspirations, and when given the opportunity, they have performed at par or outperformed boys in many areas. However, you all know that gender parity in education is by itself not sufficient guarantee of equality in economic and social outcomes. There are other challenges too. To begin with, Indian girls and women are dropping out of work, and this should be a major concern for all of us. India has one of the lowest female labor force participation rates among emerging markets and developing countries. And this rate, in fact, very worryingly has been declining in the last few years as well. This is also mainly due to the involvement of women and girls in domestic and unpaid care work, work that is undervalued, unrecognized, and underreported. Further, women and girls also face discrimination in the workplace. They get lower income, have to brave poor work conditions, unreliable transportation, and harassment as well. Therefore, the transition from education to paid work, especially work of their choice, is critical, as it lays the foundation for many of the inequalities encountered throughout the women's working lives. More so as we build back better from COVID-19. Since as UNFPA, we work primarily on health, let me also turn to health aspects of this pandemic as well. In the context of COVID, the inequitable vaccine distribution across India also highlights the cycle of marginalization experienced by women living in poverty. Many of you would have known, if you look at the vaccine figures, it's actually men who have got the higher number of vaccines in India. Lack of access to technology, inability to take decisions about their health, and bearing disproportionate care responsibilities are some factors that have hindered access to vaccines for women. This is seriously problematic. COVID-19 has further aggravated the risk of increased prevalence of traditional practices like early and forced marriages. Especially, it could be for money, it could be for various other gender norms. Mainly, many families do it as a way to combat economic distress that they're experiencing during COVID as well. The shadow pandemic of gender-based violence unfortunately, is real. The initial months of the pandemic saw a sharp increase in the number of domestic violence complaints by women across India, while complaints of crime against women rose to over 23 lakhs. Therefore, urgent action is necessary to mitigate the severe and long-lasting impacts from the pandemic and secure the future of young adults, especially girls. If you look, no country has yet attained complete gender parity in leadership, even the developed Western countries. But I believe that we will get there and that women collectively will change our world for the better. Where there is gender equality, societies are more prosperous, peace is more durable, all of society benefits. Yet many obstacles still block women's path to leadership. One of the most fundamental is the lack of bodily autonomy. Many women and girls cannot make basic decisions about their bodies, such as whether to have relationship or not, to use contraceptives or not, even to make their own healthcare choices. No woman or girl should be denied these choices. Yet we see 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, how crisis can worsen existing barriers that hinder the ability of women and girls to exercise bodily autonomy. Sexual and reproductive health services were shuttered or scaled back across the globe. And as I mentioned earlier, gender-based violence has skyrocketed. So what must be done? I will lay out some possible options for your consideration. To make change happen now, we must urgently embrace a vision of gender-responsive recovery in engagement with the government and critically in tandem with NGOs and civil society organizations. We need to apply a more powerful magnifying gender lens to make course corrections in our program interventions. Educating girls and giving them the opportunity to develop to their full potential has a multiplier effect on country's economic growth and social development. We should work towards ensuring re-enrollment of girls, coupled with digital literacy and access, to minimize dropouts on account of COVID. On the other hand, women are out on the front lines of this crisis at many levels, in hospitals, basic health units, and schools. Yet they lack the voice in making critical decisions. Efforts need to be made to immediately rectify this by making sure that women, including the most vulnerable and marginalized, have a seat at decision-making tables at the local as well as national levels. And let's not forget the men and boys. Efforts should be made to engage with men and boys as partners for change, in particular, in efforts to reduce gender-based violence, understand and address toxic masculinities, and increase gender equality. It's also necessary that responses integrate different dimensions. For example, it's important to think about investment in care infrastructure that allow women to not only re-enter, but thrive in the labor market. At the same time, complementary policy actions, such as ensuring uninterrupted access to essential services like healthcare, including mental health care, which has become paramount important during the pandemic, and education, are imperative to support the millions of families who have been and remain adversely affected. Discriminatory social and cultural norms and the gender division of roles they impose must be challenged. Policy responses must take a gender-sensitive approach that considers the complexities and nuances of the current challenges we are facing and focus on addressing and shifting negative social norms. Finally, not as a UNFPA representative, but as a father of 2 adolescent girls, let me tell you that a woman or a girl who cannot realize bodily autonomy may face compounding barriers to equality throughout her life, undermining the range of rights and choices required to become a leader. That is why we must ensure women both gain skills and opportunities to lead and can build on a firm foundation of bodily autonomy. In the end, let me state this. Responding to the pandemic is not just about rectifying long-standing inequalities, but also about building a resilient world in the interest of everyone, with girls and women at the center of recovery. Gender equality and the rights of girls and women are essential to getting through this pandemic together, to recovering faster, and to building a better future for everyone. Therefore, applying a gender lens and investing in women and girls is not just a question of rights. It is also smart economics with benefits to society, many times the cost. So let's make a fresh start with women and girls at the center of everything we do. That must be the new motto, the new mantra. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Plan India, again for giving me this opportunity. I wish you more strength in your important work and all the best with the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriram, for a very compelling analysis on the gender lens, gender lens response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and very importantly, the set of very doable solutions that you have articulated through this platform, through your presentation, which is very, very important. And I think it's something which each one of us as development workers, as people committed to gender transformative development, should recognize, should internalize, and work towards action. Thank you. And now may I request Dr. Dhaneshwar Manohar Mule. He is the member of the National Human Rights Commission. Dr. Mule is from the 1983 batch of Indian Foreign Service and has served in several capacities, including the Consul General of India, New York, High Commissioner of India to Mali, and Secretary CPV and OIA, Ministry of External Affairs. Dr. Mule is also a successful writer and has written about 15 books, which have been translated in Arabic, Divehi, Urdu, Kannada, and Hindi. His magnum opus, Mati Pank Ani Akash, written in Marathi, has received immense popularity and has also been prescribed in the arts curriculum at the North Maharashtra University, Jalgaon. He has inspired several socio-economic projects, including Balodyan, an orphanage in his native village, and Dr. Mule, the Dhaneshwar Mule Education Society, which seeks to introduce innovative concepts like global education. The D.Y. Patil University of Mumbai honored him with Doctorate of Literature for exemplary contributions to society in January 2017. A documentary titled Gypsy and a book titled Dr. Dhaneshwar Mule, Passport Man of India, celebrate his life and work. Dr. Dhaneshwar Mule is also serving as chairperson of Pravasi Bharatiya Academic and Scientific Sampark, as well international operation of the CSIR. And Dr. Mule, as we have interacted, and many of you would be aware, has also been very actively pushing the envelope, especially with regards to the mission positivity, and trying to bring positivity within the development discourse. And today, he will be talking to us on the theme Mission Positivity and Building Future of Girls. So may I request Dr. Mule, thank you, sir, for this joining us here, and over to you, sir.
Namaskar and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Muhammad Asif and Anushri, I think, who came to me a few weeks back and informed about this wonderful conference. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, my colleague there, Shriram Harirajji, and very distinguished audience here as well as elsewhere. I am perhaps the most non-technical person that has been invited for this particular discourse, I would say. Just now, Asif mentioned about my stint as Secretary CPV in MEA. And I recollected that when the matter for reforms in the passport system came to me, or rather, that was one of my passions. One of the things that I did introduce is that child of a parent who have been divorced, or where the wife has been sort of abandoned or whatever purpose, not staying together, will have a choice to write the name of only one parent. Well, seemingly this is a very small, change, and the wife or the spouse who is involved in a divorce case or actually divorced, they do not have to write the name of their spouse in the passport anymore. Till 2016, this was kind of mandatory to write. So small but interesting interventions can change a lot, not only in terms of the ease of so-called business doing or not doing, but also in terms of social mobility. Because from 16 documents, when we brought down to 3 documents, passport, Aadhaar card, and PAN card, we not only reformed the passport process, but we reformed maybe the entire mobility of 1.3 billion population. So coming back to my topic, I wanted to emphasize this point that each of us can do something. Before coming to this particular conference, I asked my wife, we were having breakfast together, we always do, what is that one thing you would like me to say? Because I'm not going to narrate statistics. I'm not going to really come up with any new ideas because experts are sitting here who are really devoted their whole life to this cause. So she said that attitude change. And of course, I said, I'll explain to me. That part I'll come later. But I think that is really the basis. I work on positivity. In office, I'm concerned with human rights. Outside, I'm obsessed or passionate about positivity. Because in my 36, 37 years of service in the government and elsewhere, social sector, I would say, as a volunteer, I have been possessed about this question as to what is that one overarching solution? Just like Einstein, of course, he was a great man who wanted to find out one theme that explains how the universe is governed. And Buddha, of course, is another example who left his house and the palace in search of quote unquote the truth. I'm not a Buddha or neither Einstein, but I also have been possessed about this question. What is that will really change us? And one way of doing it, I thought, was let's do whatever we do. Let's try to find out how we can help others. Okay, it's simple as that. And since I'm not neither Buddha nor Einstein, I just thought that I must search the answers around us. What is that particular foundation? Lots of people are working on the women's issues, children's issues, transgender issues, issues pertaining to sex workers, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, rural population, urban slum dwellers, education sector, health sector. You have a number of bodies, both, and government is also focusing on these things. But what is that one thing we can do together? That is when, and all of us can forget our small little distinctions and work together. And then the answer to me came from my constitution, the Constitution of India. And I don't think there should be any disagreement. Everybody, whether they agree it from within or not, they have to agree. It's our own document, it's our own gift that we have given to ourselves. It's not only a gift, it's also a commitment. Now, how what is to be done about it? So, just as my wife said, the attitude, how is the attitude to be built? Then the reply to it came from the preamble, where we have very clearly identified justice, freedom, and equality. It might be the responsibility of state to protect and promote our human rights, but it is the duty of every individual to follow human rights. If I cannot follow human rights in my private capacity, I will not be able to enjoy the fruits of human rights at all. So the idea is you have no choice if you really want to build that quote unquote utopia right here. We're not following the principles of justice, equality, and freedom. There's no choice. Now, it's easier said than done. We all know that there isn't any thing like freedom. I'm not talking about the freedom of expression and what the current discourse. I'm talking about the freedom in the real sense of the term. Can my sister move freely? Can my mother, without any going through any problems, receive the medical assistance and health at my village? She is there. She's 93. She might be alone. So freedom in that sense available all the time to everyone, everywhere. Same with equality. Equality should be, there is access to equality, equity should be available to everyone all the time. And last one is justice. These are our promises and our gifts also. They are commitments as well as duties. And then justice. Where is justice today? Our own court, Supreme Court judges say that it's expensive, not accessible. Judges are not being filled in. Special courts being established, not often being, operative. Here you have these three. What does an individual do? And how do we identify whether a person is following these three principles or not in his or her life? How do we find a positive person? Because that's my definition. That one who believes and follows and practices these three is the person who is positive. In today's world where all of us want a negative certificate, the discourse of positivity may get lost, but that's perhaps the most important thing that we need to really discuss about. Because when I think it was Jha who said that trust is very, very important. So it will come only when we follow these principles, and when we follow these principles in our day-to-day life, what does it mean? I have prepared a criteria, a set of three practices that each of us can follow to follow the bigger three values in our life. Number one is we have to be creative in whatever we do, innovative. We use the word innovative, but I don't use it necessarily in terms of business development and commercial activities. I use it in terms of being creative in our day-to-day life, being innovative in our every action as an individual. Because if we have freedom, that can be, creativity can be enjoyed and it can be practiced also. Number two is compassion. If we believe in equality, we have to practice compassion. What, in the jargon that we have developed, we call it inclusivity, inclusive. That is same as compassion, because if you have no compassion, there is going to be no inclusivity. And third one is justice. How do you practice justice is being constructive, because you might be innovative and creative, you might be compassionate, but that has to lead to some constructive, progressive outcomes to the society. Now, this is the framework of positivity that I have, and under this, I'm working relentlessly from 2019 when I retired, and we have got about 150 organizations. We do not disturb their autonomy. They work in their own field, but we try to create a moral force behind them, a force of positivity, because my dream is to create a way of positivity if possible, just to, sort of do away with the pessimism, negativity that has really sprouted everywhere. We also face these issues as individuals on a day-to-day basis. So 150 organizations are currently, you can say, practicing positivity, but the hundreds others are also practicing. So we need to all help each other, have a multiplying effect, and create a force that will really be the transformative force of India and perhaps the whole of humanity, because it is not necessarily that everything that America is doing right, or other countries whom we try to emulate in our day-to-day lives, try to be like them. That's not, in my view, the answer. About girl child, I'll just narrate you 2-3 examples which recently I have observed. I met a few days back Kalraj Mishra, who is the governor of Rajasthan, and I asked him, what are the 4 or 5 issues that confront you as the governor of this state? And in the first 5, there are almost 3 which pertain to women. And number of top on the agenda was child marriages, the increasing child marriages. Number two, he said crimes against women like dowry deaths and harassment, sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse of various kinds. And third, he said police inaction. If somebody goes to police with all these complaints, they simply do not register FIR. Even in human rights, we get a lot of complaints. One of our primary job has become making the police to register their FIRs. So, obviously, the statistics will show that there hasn't been this practice of child marriage has really got enhanced during the pandemic. And the situation might be, different in varying degrees, but you see in Marathwada and Vidarbha in Maharashtra, which is my home state, the number of child marriages have gone up. Again, the distinction there is women are of younger age, and the men are of older age. That's again a very important thing. So, second example I'll give you how women suffer is my own. I come from a joint family, and one of my cousins married a girl from a different caste in my own village. That's kind of a majority caste in the village. The pressure was built to such an extent that they had to run away. I aided him in his running away effort also. These were both measures and economically somewhat, I would say, semi-independent. And unexpected. Generally, our household was considered very pious, good family, joint family, no chaos, no fights. And suddenly a kind of there was like a volcanic eruption in my village. And, we would get stones being thrown at our house in the night. People will come shout in groups in front of our house. But the worst sufferer was my sister, who was also going to college near our village. She was almost being stopped, harassed. She was told that she'll be raped, she'll be killed, she'll be kidnapped. And those threats came to us even through letters. So what should have been generally a happy occasion was turned into an absolute tragedy for us. And I think it took about 10 to 15 years to recover from that particular tragedy. But things have changed. My daughter was able to join the Indian Foreign Service. That's because we were able to give her the kind of atmosphere which is really respects and values freedom. We never told her that you should not join here, you should not do this. We should just say go and experiment out there. So there are a lot of negative things that is happening. The same village now, the same community I mentioned, whose name I won't mention, has an issue of crisis of women. They have to go out to Andhra and Telangana to bring brides. Or so I'm told that similar situation is there in Rajasthan as well as some districts in Haryana. So what's happened? This latest National Family Health Survey does not really talk of child sex ratio at the birth. That's still very what should I say, abysmal, very dangerous levels. We cannot sustain, because adult population is one thing. Their ratio could be varying for different reasons altogether. But for children, it's very, very important that there is some symmetry in this thing. However, there are good signs. My entire village, every girl, every boy is literate now. But however, literacy doesn't change the situation. If you see, even now, the child ratio at birth is better in, somewhat better in rural areas. And I think 931 2,000 men as compared to 924 in urban areas. So what it shows to us is being literate, being highly educated, being in good position in government or in politics does not change the situation much. So the real solution will have to again come back to my wife before I end. And I asked her how to change this. And she said that we have to see that boys and girls are brought up in the same manner. And number two, the onus of everything that goes wrong has to be put on the boy, not on the girl. She says that is perhaps the way to go forward. Through our movement of positivity, we are really trying to create this kind of awareness where, let everybody do, let every organization do its own work in different segments. But let's not forget the overarching umbrella that you have, which is very beautiful, which is really, it is not only a menu for today, but it's a way forward for tomorrow. So even when we are bring back a better, also, we have to also think of, building, forth a future. And that is really through the constitutional values of, once again, coming back to the freedom, equality, and justice. With these words, I thank you all. Please do join Movement of Positivity, Mission Positivity, and let's all, this is a very noble work that Plan India has undertaken. I have been, I've been seeing all the literature that they have sent to me. There is a need for such organizations, but however much we want to do, one organization cannot change and bring the transformation that we all, want to bring. So let's, join hands. There was a time when, many said that a woman does not deserve freedom because, father protects her, husband protects her, son protects her, and does she really deserve freedom? I know things have to change, and if you have to build really a equitable future, agenda number 5 of SDGs, then we'll have to really promote the values of these constitutional values that we have. Same is reflected in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and SDGs are nothing really about, it's about human declaration, of human rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So thank you very much, and all the best. One sentence of my wife, I forgot. She'll beat me if I don't say it. She said that women should not be told that they cannot, they should not tell themselves that they cannot have it all. That was her sentence. And he says that this has to be a conviction of every person, particularly of a girl child. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mulle. Thank you for the inspiring words. But I think the framework that you have laid down for us, a framework which is derived from the Constitution of India, which is hinged on or pivoted on freedom, equality, and justice, and which is bolstered through creativity and inclusivity. I think that this framework for positivity, I think that's a very important kind of a pathway for each one of us. And thank you for very in very simple words elaborating on this framework and helping us understand and connecting it to the very important agenda of how women and girls become an important stakeholder, an important participant in the movement of positivity, and how the movement of positivity will bring not just national development, but also help in driving gender equality within India and globally. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this the inaugural address. And may I now move on to invite our next guest, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal. He is the Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM. Major General M.K. Bindal is presently the Executive Director of NIDM. He was commissioned into the Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985. An alumnus of the National Defense Academy, Major General Bindal is a graduate of the Defense Services Staff College and has attended the prestigious Higher Command course at the Army War College. Besides excelling in all other career courses in the Army. He holds a master's degree in Defense and Strategic Studies as well as Masters of Philosophy in Defense and Management Studies. During his more than 3 decades of service, he has held important command and staff assignments. Major General Bindal served as the Provost Marshal at the United Nations mission in Mozambique, where he was deeply involved in the liquidation of the mission. He has been Director, Center for United Nations Peacekeeping in New Delhi. For 3 years, he was also the Secretary of the International Association of Peacekeeping Training Centers. Under his leadership, very important to mention that the National Institute of Disaster Management has been working very intensively on developing curriculum and modules on disaster risk reduction. And a very important work that the NIDM has recently done is to create a pathway and a module for child-centered disaster risk reduction, and which has very important significance for our conversation here. So may I request Dr. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal to join us. He will be sharing his experience on disaster risk management to ensure well-being and inclusive development for girls. Over to you, sir.
Jai Hind to everyone. Before I start my conversation, firstly, I would like to thank Mohammad Asif, Plan India, Dr. Gyaneshwar Mule, Shri Hariram Das, Shri Ram Haridas, and Ms. Rathija, who spoke in the morning, and all the esteemed analysts and resource persons who are sitting here, that this program is come at a very right time when we are seeing the effects of a disaster, especially on women and children. And it is becoming more and more apparent because there were a lot of unseen disasters happening when a disaster strikes, and that was not being accounted for in the normal policies. Before that, I will just comment on what Dr. Mule spoke about compassion. 2 weeks back, I had called His Holiness the Dalai Lama on my program, and I asked him a question about what is compassion and love, what is the role of compassion and love in disaster risk reduction or in a disaster-related incidents. And he also explained that the core of everything is compassion and not sympathy. As long as we work with compassion in our heart, everything comes together. And he also stressed upon that we must develop compassion in all our curriculum, which today it is not being done so. So he said, and once we develop compassion in any individual, things will automatically fall in place. Then we don't have to ignite each other's mind to do something good. Everyone will start doing the right thing in the right way. So with that, I support Dr. Mule in what he spoke about positivity, because we have done a lot of programs on positivity and spiritualism in disaster management with various religious and spiritual organizations and various universities dealing with spiritualism. And these messages that he brought about come out loud and clear in that. NIDM has been conducting a lot of programs on women, child, gender-based activities. In last 2 years, I think I've conducted more than 200 programs, online programs on this, and must have more than 40,000 people would have participated in that. And that is where we came across Plan and NIDM collaborated in one of the programs, and we discussed about women and child gender-related disaster risk reduction. So I thank Plan India for organizing this and maybe for the first time introducing disaster as risk reduction as part of the agenda. You saw what clippings that came out, what the girls spoke about as to what is the one word for the Build Back Better. And most of their answers were centered around safety, privacy, and a few were for empowerment. They never spoke about a larger leadership or larger issues or nothing. So that itself shows the mindset of a girl child, that the way she has been brought up, she's looking for such small things, and hence that is the root cause why we are not progressing. Every woman, every girl child should be made confident that she has to ask for the moon. Then only she'll be able to reach somewhere near the moon. If she asks for pebbles on the ground, she'll remain there. And hence the message that we must send across is that the imagination is the limit and not everyday requirements is the limit. So now I'll come down to my own topic because disaster risk management to ensure well-being and inclusive development for girls. It's a very, very important topic. I'll just give you of 2 or 3 examples how it affects, but does not get documented. In Srinagar, during the 2014 floods, I was in charge of lot many things there, including response. So there was a marooned area where a small camp had been put up. And when we used to give water and other things, in the Srinagar, the areas for men and women were generally secluded. And in the women's section, when we used to provide water, soft drinks, which used to come from the whole country, they never used to drink it. So it was so surprising. Then I sent one of my lady officers to go and find out why are they not drinking. Yesterday also we supplied them so many juices and all. So then answer that came that if we drink, we will have to go to the washroom. And there's no facility out here, there's no privacy. So we have to wait for the night to find a safe place which is not available to go to the washroom. Now, such a simple thing, but imagine how she is coping up with that. So there are many such instances like in COVID-19, BMC, Bombay Municipal Corporation, set up a helpline, Maharashtra. And within 35 days data that we came across in the MHA, more than 40% of the calls were from women and children. And out of that, nearly 26% of that 40% were related to domestic violence or mental trauma. So that is the scale we are looking at. That is the scale we are looking at. And that is just Mumbai itself I'm talking about. Imagine what would be happening in the whole country. So it is rightly said that disasters don't discriminate, what people do. The existing socioeconomic conditions also mean that disasters can lead to different outcomes, even for demographically similar communities. But inevitably, the most vulnerable groups that suffer more than others are the women and children, and the elderly, of course. So research has revealed that disasters reinforce, perpetuate, and increase gender inequality, which has been also spoken by Mr. Haridas earlier, and making bad situations worse for women. Meanwhile, the potential contributions that women can offer to the disaster risk reduction around the world are often overlooked. And female leadership in building community resilience to disasters is frequently disregarded. Again, I'll come back to Srinagar example. There, on the 3rd day, I'll say, when we were supplying and saving people through the boats, one of the elderly people asked for a BP tablet and a heart tablet, a small tablet which they have every day. I'm forgetting the name. So next day we supplied that tablet to that man. And seeing that, by evening, we got a whole lot of list of medicines that they wanted. In that, and then I started sending my lady officer also along with all my teams. She got a quiet child that we require something for our monthly problem. And then we rang up the AWA here in Delhi, and a plane full load of those items came and we started distributing. Then we had gynec issues. Then we took a lady doctor from that community, put her in the boat, and we took her around to each household wherever they wanted intervention. So there are many insecurities and issues which the women face during disasters, which are not cannot be addressed because of privacy issues, and they're afraid to speak it out because of privacy issues and the stigma attached to various things. But women, with their extensive knowledge of communities, social roles of managing natural environmental resources, and caring responsibilities, increasingly play a critical role in disaster risk management. In villages, even today, a woman decides the water that they have collected or she has collected from 20 kilometers away, and it is kept in 3 different pots based on the duration of collection. And she decides just by the color and taste whether it is fit for drinking or not, whether it is fit for cooking or not. She's deciding the whole health of the family by her own experience. But when we plan a water intervention, a tube well or a pump, she's never taken on board. I remember in Srinagar, when I was doing CIE ops, we have a lot of funds there in one of the villages where we wanted to put a hand pump. So we went there and we said, we have hand pump and we have that solar lights to be put. They bang on, planted right in the middle of the village and with a street lamp on top of it. Very good. It was, for a photograph, it was such a good ceremony. But after 20 days, we found no one is using it. Then again, I sent my ladies team there to find out what is the problem, why the lady is not using it. The issue was, how do you expect us to go to that washing area, wash our clothes, take bath in the open with the street light also on at night? So we shifted it to a place after consulting the women to an area where adequate privacy was available to them. So this is, I'm giving an example. If women are brought on board right in the beginning, we can resolve many issues and make it livable for them. And that's why I'm saying empowering women is the key to strengthening the disaster resilience of communities. When it comes to post-disaster action, unfortunately, there are too many instances where recovery efforts have failed women and girls by not considering their needs and capacities in recovery planning and thereby reinforcing and even increasing existing gender equalities. In Bhuj earthquake, I was again, my own house had come down. Unfortunately, I've been in many disasters myself, and being in the army, I was part of all response teams all the time. We set up a lot of camps. So in that camp, there was a woman, again in Gujarat also, that segregation is quite a lot in many areas. A women camp was established and a men's camp was established. And for the women's camp, within that camp was a secluded area, separate washrooms were established for them. And on the 3rd day, I had to plant guard around that women's area to save them from the men's camp, to protect them from the men's camp. So post-disaster also, during the immediately after the aftermath of disasters, there is a separate requirement for the women which needs to be looked at. So governments and disaster risk management practitioners have a responsibility to reach, protect, and empower women, girls, men, and boys before, during, and in the aftermath of disasters. Today, my talk will be purely related to disaster and women and children, not all other activities that are supposed to be done in every sphere in everyday life. So it is, and it has to be done because it is the right thing to do. And also, by doing so, will make the recovery process more effective and efficient. In Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, they had one of the biggest refugee camps. And so beautifully they laid it out. One of their professors had given a lecture in one of my programs. And he showed the camp, how they had made it for the women. And they fenced it all around, how they made it for the marginalized people, people with disabilities, how they made it for the elderly people, and how medical facility for each section was being provided. They had taken care of almost all the needs that was required to be done. It was an ideal camp that was set up. So that we have percolated that through our network also, the best practices of that. Women and girls, we know, account for nearly half of the 200 million people which are affected annually by natural disasters. And hence they are typically at greater risk from the natural hazards than the men, and particularly in low-income countries and among the poor. In many cases, the important roles or the potential roles the women take on are often not recognized, and women themselves are largely marginalized in the development of the DRR. DRR is disaster risk reduction policy and decision making, and the voices go unheard. Yet in most crisis situations, they are the majority of the people affected, and they need maximum assistance in the emergencies. Because disaster impacts are not gender neutral. The impact, a 20-year study on gendered nature of natural disasters, it shows that in societies where the socio-economic status of women is low, natural disasters kill more women than men, both directly and indirectly through related post-disaster events. And it also showed that disasters kill women at a younger age than men. And that the impacts are never merely determined by nature of its own, but by its secondary effects also. And the difference in mortality lies in the fact that women have lower socioeconomic status, which in turn leads to unequal access to opportunities and unequal exposure to risks, making them vulnerable to natural disasters. The increased vulnerability of women has many dimensions. Like the women's reproductive roles can limit their chances of survival. Those in the final stages of pregnancy and women with young kids are less mobile. You'll be surprised that how Orissa government dealt with this issue. During Cyclone Fani in 2019, where nearly 5 million people were evacuated, they took special care of disaggregating the data, of evacuating the pregnant women in the advanced stages separately. And it will be a news to you that while the cyclone was going on, there were 8 births which were given during the cyclone, and all survived. So that is how the interventions have to be, and such vulnerabilities of the women and young kids needs to be removed. In many of the camps, while this is being done, I'll give an example of, I'll not name the country, where during the camp, nearly 200 young girls were married off below 12 years. And why they were married off? To ensure their safety from others. Not because of money, not because of anything. So social norms and gender roles may significantly affect women's and girls' ability to survive the impacts of a disaster. Because self-rescue ability is not taught to them. They are confined to their homes, like swimming, tree climbing, like in floods or in storm surges. Tree climbing is a basic skill that is required for people to survive. They climb a tree and then they wait for someone to come and save them. They're not being taught to them. And generally men and boys are the ones who keep practicing. Dress code is such a small issue. But we have seen in disasters that many of the women and children, girl child, are not able to extricate themselves from a disaster-affected area because of the dress code. Because they have to first put on a dress to run out. Whereas the men folk, even if they have a lungi or a towel on, they run out and they survive. But women cannot do that. I remember in Bhuj earthquake, my daughter, that time she was 3.5 years old. And when this earthquake struck, I was not at home. I was outside Bhuj on one of the mountains doing some field exercise. So my buddy was there in the house that time. And when the earthquake struck and she was in the bathroom, he just picked her up and ran out. Till today, she blames that buddy कि मेरे को dress code क्यों नहीं ensure किया. But imagine that small girl, and she would not talk to that boy for months. At such a young age, she was aware कि मेरे को ऐसे उठा के कोई ले गया. कुछ पहनाना था. So dress code is such a small issues which come into play when a disaster strikes, and these split-second decisions when the earthquake, you need to run out, but the woman is more or the girl is more involved कि shawl ले लें, चुन्नी ले लें, कुछ ले लें, जो भी है. But as per the societal कि बाहर जाके you don't know when you will come back. So this also is a very, very important issue. Limited access to economic resources has already been covered. Then laws and inheritance laws and traditions, marriage arrangements, banking systems, they all reinforce women's dependence on their fathers, husbands, and sons, and hence they lack the power to change things. We saw all those girls speaking about, no one spoke about the change. They spoke about basic necessities. Whereas what we require is a societal change. We have recently taken out some, we're taking out some publications on social and behavioral change communication, in which WASH concept and many other concepts are being talked about, and which is also targeting the women and children and the girls in particular, because unless we change the mindset of the society and mindset of the girls and women in particular, that they have to insist upon that change in every household, in every forum, in every school, every discussion, things will not change. Because gone are those days when things are forced down. Okay, you take this and live a happy life. No, it has to be bottom-up approach. Today we are practicing, when we are practicing child protection, we are practicing security of girls. It's all top-down approach. I'm talking about a participatory approach. I'm talking about an inclusive approach, which should be taken into consideration. The immediate impact of disasters like displacement, destruction of homes, the schools, health services, loss of financial security, loss of livelihood, destruction of the existing social protection mechanisms, they also expose the women and girls to long-term effects and consequences, which could include early and forced marriages just for survival, trauma, increased vulnerability to gender-based violence, exposure to sexually transmitted infections and HIV, COVID-19, again, has exposed the children to the domestic violence, the domestic argument of the parents, which earlier used to be done behind closed doors or when the children were out playing. Since everyone was there 24/7, the thing could not be controlled for beyond a particular time, and they got all exposed. Imagine the trauma or the thought that the child is having, which it will carry for future. So engaging and empowering women is a very, very important role which we must talk about. So we need to promote and provide incentives for the meaningful participation of women in disaster and climate risk management, including in leadership roles. I fully agree that because of the misogynist attitude, because of the patriarchal society, the upbringing is such that men are not ready to give away their powers to women. It is a standard fact. We cannot blame the men for that because the whole system has been brought up like that. That's why when Dr. Mulle spoke about what his wife said, that children should be treated equally right from the birth, is very, very important thing. Even in the house, we have had in our programs girl child complaining कि मेरे भाई को tab जाता है whole day for doing online education. I have to wait for my father who comes back from whatever work he's doing at night and use his mobile at night. And most of the time when he comes back, the mobile is discharged. So I have to stand next to a switchboard and read in that small screen. उसमें भी उनके call आते रहते हैं. But imagine the disparity that is going on within a household between the boy has to go out and earn, and hence he has to be given more facilities. Whereas the girl child who is also studying in this, maybe the same class, is being denied that. So this difference is what mindset is what we should aim at. And we have to support this gender mainstreaming in all our policies, relevant laws, plans, budgets, and all related to disaster risk management. So a disaster risk management committees must be set up at all levels, wherever we are, whichever organization we are, and which should have representation of all stakeholders and should have adequate women representation. I'm not laying down a percentage, even though many documents talk about 33%. UN also talks about a certain percentage in UN peacekeeping operations. National government also talks about 33% or something like that in various forums. But there again, you see the men is being kept above the women. Why not the other way around? Why not 50-50? So that mindset is what I'm saying. That is what mindset, not only of women, of the men also needs to change. That doesn't mean I have changed my mindset. It is just, it takes time. It takes time. I have got two daughters. One is married and one is marriageable age. So I have tried in my house not to have anything, but it takes time to accept that role. Women need to be equal. And so today we are talking about child-friendly spaces. There are PhDs going on in Western countries where they are giving PhD for doing research on child-friendly spaces. There are postgraduate programs is going on child-friendly spaces while planning in any area, while planning any intervention. So I will say, why not girls-friendly spaces should also form part of this whole protection. That even in our disaster management planning, we should talk about girls-friendly camp, women and child-friendly camp within a camp, and we must plan separately for them. So that issue needs to be so that they are safe and the places are accessible to them, both from privacy issues, sanitation issues, and others. I'm talking in the lens of disaster risk reduction. Water infrastructure, I've given you an example where what happened when we did not consult the women and how we corrected it. Then sexual harassment is very, very important, especially in the rehab sites, wherever we have. We set up so many camps during the disasters, and it takes time for them to come back to their original dwelling, which also 95% time has got destroyed. So they're living in a sort of camp-like situation without any protection. And that is where they need to be given that protection, and sanitation facilities, very, very important. So I will conclude that gender-specific programming that addresses girls' unique needs and is culturally competent helps build their resilience, and implementing such activities for girls in advance of a disaster may help build their resilience and self-sufficiency. Women and girls display a wealth of capacities before, during, and after disasters. Although they are often denied the opportunity to engage in formal disaster risk reduction actions, evidence has suggested that women are engaged in planning, designing, implementing, and monitoring disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and rehabilitation plans and projects. Disaster losses can be substantially reduced. Even our Honorable Prime Minister's 10-point agenda on disaster risk reduction talks about inclusiveness and women leadership in disaster risk reduction. Now we are taking out a compendium on this particular subject of case studies from around the world, which will promote this particular agenda of the Honorable Prime Minister. So with this, I have completed my talk, and I'm thankful to Plan India for giving me this opportunity to talk on such an important and relevant issue. Thank you so much. Jai Hind to all.
Thank you, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal ji, for drawing our attention to a very important subject of disaster risk management, and especially highlighting on that while disasters impact everybody, but it has a differential impact on girls and young women, and women in particular, and therefore our response and our disaster risk reduction strategies, our disaster risk management strategies, our response work has to factor that that aspect very clearly, and the solutions that you have recommended, sir, I think, and the analysis that you presented are very helpful, and it sets the right context for the subsequent conversations, especially when we get into the thematic discussions on education, on mental health, on ending gender-based violence, especially in the COVID context. So thank you, sir, for drawing attention and laying a strong foundation and to the conversations at the Plan for Every Child 2021. So I think with these words, we will conclude the inaugural session. Once again, I'll share a big thank you to Ratiji for her welcome address, Ms. Rati Vinay Jha, President Plan India Governing Board, for kind of laying the framework for this 2021 Plan for Every Child conference. A big thank you to Sriram for a very elaborate analysis of the gender dimensions and kind of drawing attention that why it's important to not just look at things from a gender lens, but also search for solutions with a gender lens for long-term sustained impact. So thank you, Sriram, for being with us here and elaborating and sharing your perspective and the UN perspective on the gender lens for promoting equality. Dr. Muley, unfortunately, he had to leave because he has some other engagements. So a big thank you to Dr. Dhaneshwar Muley for his talk on mission positivity and why it's important for us in the development sector to kind of keep that framework, having a focus on the constitutional core elements, as well as elements of compassion, inclusivity, and creativity, while we are discussing more detailed issues on Build Back Better. And finally, a big thank you to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal. Thank you, sir, for being with us here, for giving us a clear pathway on why it's important for us as development practitioners and humanitarian workers to have a clear and unambiguous focus on girls, and not just from a targeting point of view, but also from participation, from including girls and young women in everything at every step of our journey. So thank you for that, and finally, thanks to all my friends. We have, I understand, development workers. We have youth champions of change who have connected as participants from different parts of the country, various districts. And thank you for being part of the inaugural session. I know we have overstepped the time, but it was worth listening to some really brilliant ideas and solutions. So with these, thank you, and we'll end the session here, and we'll pass on to the next session after a brief break. Thank you.